I'm Ava Williams, 23 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I was the daughter who never disappointed. Straight A's, perfect attendance, the student council president, and volunteer at the local clinic. The girl everyone in Cedar Creek expected to succeed. My parents, Thomas and Rachel, would beam with pride at every family gathering, introducing me as their future doctor. My brother Jack and I grew up in a modest three-bedroom house on Willow Lane, in a town so small, everyone's business was everyone else's entertainment. Jack was the golden boy, the rough and tumble kid who could fix anything with his hands, while I was the quiet achiever burying myself in books and advanced science projects. Our childhood was filled with memories of holiday dinners, birthday cakes shared under a flickering porch light, and late-night talks when the world felt too big for two kids from a small town. But if you looked closer, there was always an unspoken rule: Jack was the future of the family name, while I was just passing through until I married or moved away. Still, I believed in the dream they sold me, that if I worked hard enough, my future would be secure, supported by the family who claimed to stand behind me. At graduation, I walked across the stage valedictorian, and full of hope, my sights set on Columbia University's pre-med program. The acceptance letter had arrived in a thick white envelope that I carried around for days, like a shield against doubt. My parents promised they would cover the difference, that the family's resources would be my foundation as I built my future. I wanted so badly to believe them. I wanted to believe that all those late nights spent studying while Jack tinkered in the garage meant something, that they would see me finally as more than the girl who would eventually leave. But beneath their promises, I missed the quick glances they shared when I talked about dorm life or internships, the hesitation in my mother's voice when she said, "Of course we'll make it work." I ignored the creeping feeling that my dreams were my own burden to bear. I told myself it was stress, that every family had secrets they didn't share. What I didn't know was that my family's secret was a betrayal so deep it would leave scars I'm still learning to trace. It was in those final weeks before I was supposed to leave for New York that everything began to unravel, revealing not just a lack of money, but a truth far uglier and more personal. But at that moment, standing in the cramped living room of our small town home, I still believed in them. I still believed in the power of family and in the promises we make to each other, until I learned just how disposable my future was to them. I walked into our dining room that summer evening, still riding the high of graduation and the promise of everything I'd been working for. The mahogany table gleamed under the flickering light fixture plates, already set like we were celebrating something. I remember the way my father, Thomas Williams, sat with his arms crossed over his chest, the same way he always did when he had news he knew I wouldn't like. My mother, Rachel, kept her eyes fixed on the water glass in front of her, tracing the condensation with her finger. Jack, as usual, was nowhere to be found, off with friends, probably bragging about his new toy that I hadn't even known existed yet. I took my seat, still smiling, still so certain that the world was opening up before me. Dad cleared his throat, his deep voice steady. "Ava, your mother and I have been reviewing the numbers. Columbia is, well, it's more expensive than we thought. We need to have a serious talk about how this is going to work." I remember feeling like I'd been punched, though his words were carefully chosen, each syllable meant to soften the blow that was already crushing my chest. Mom wouldn't meet my eyes. "We're worried about how much debt you'll take on," she said, her voice small. "Maybe you should think about starting at the community college here, just for a year or two, then transfer when it's more feasible." Feasible. Like my dreams were a luxury item that could be postponed until they felt like paying attention. I reminded them about the partial scholarship, how it would cover half the tuition, how I'd already lined up a work-study position on campus. "That's still over $20,000 a year," Dad said, his tone final. "It's not realistic." My hands clenched and my lap nails biting into my palms. I wanted to scream at them, to make them see how every promise they'd ever made was unraveling right here in this room. But I just sat there listening as they listed off alternatives that felt like punishments. Community college delaying my dream, maybe even giving it up altogether. My mind raced, desperate to find the words that would make them see me. But nothing came out except the truth that was choking me. They decided this long before I ever walked across that graduation stage. I could see it in their faces, the same resigned expression of people who'd already chosen a side. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the weight of their decision pressing me down. My room, once a sanctuary of textbooks and university brochures, felt like a prison. How could they sit me down and tell me my dreams didn't matter? Not when they'd spent my entire life telling me they did. I thought of every time my father had said, "Ava, you're going to make this family proud." Every time my mother had tucked a strand of hair behind my ear and whispered, "We'll always be here for you." Lies. All of it. They didn't want me to succeed. They wanted me to shrink to fit into the mold they'd chosen for me. I didn't know then what I would do next. I didn't know how I would fight back. But I knew one thing with a clarity that was sharper than the betrayal in their eyes. I wouldn't let their small dreams define my big future. If you've ever felt the sting of your own family, choosing someone else's future over yours, share your story in the comments and subscribe to my channel to remind me I'm not alone. Your voice matters. Your dreams matter. Let's stand together. I woke up the next morning with the weight of their betrayal still heavy on my chest, but determined to find a way around it. I refused to let my dreams die in that dining room, even if my family thought it was acceptable to let them wither. Over the next few days, I buried myself in research, every scholarship, every grant, every possible loan that could bridge the gap Columbia's partial scholarship had left. I made spreadsheets lists, filled out forms until my fingers cramped. Each evening, I'd bring these options to my parents, like offerings, laying them out one by one, in desperate hope they would see how much I wanted this, how much I needed it. But every night they met me with the same polite but firm refusal, the same hollow words about practicality and responsibility. It was like they'd rehearsed this role of concerned parents so many times that they'd forgotten how to be honest with me. I tried to keep hope alive, but cracks kept forming in the story they told me. My mother's new patio furniture that showed up one afternoon, shiny and expensive, sitting on the deck like a monument to misplaced priorities. My father's fishing trips with his friends, the new rod he showed off to the neighbors, like it was a family heirloom. When I questioned them about these things, my mother waved her hand dismissively. "These are small luxuries, Ava. They don't change the big picture." But they did. They were symbols of everything they valued more than my education, more than my future. I tried to tell myself it was stress, that maybe they were just too afraid to say what they were really thinking, but the truth refused to stay hidden. One night, I overheard them arguing behind their bedroom door. My mother's voice, sharp and trembling, said, "We can't keep lying to her, Thomas. She deserves to know." And my father's answer, cold and unwavering, "She doesn't need to know. This is what's best for the family. Jack needs this." My brother's name dropped into the middle of my dreams like a lead weight. Jack. My brother, the golden boy, who never had to prove himself, who never had to beg for support or understanding. I realized in that moment that their betrayal wasn't about money at all. It was about who they thought deserved to succeed. I remembered how Dad always called Jack the man of the house when he was just a boy, how he taught him to fix cars in the garage, while I was told to keep the house clean and stay out of the way. I remembered the way my mother would light up when Jack walked in, her smile just a little brighter, her voice a little warmer. It had always been there, the quiet, insidious favoritism I'd tried so hard not to see. The final blow came 2 days later at Jack's graduation party. The entire family gathered in the backyard, balloons in school colors, a cake with congratulations. Jack piped in bright frosting. My father stood at the head of the picnic table, grinning, and said, "We have a surprise for you, son." And there it was, a brand new Ford Raptor truck, black with chrome, trim a red bow on the hood so bright it made my eyes water. My mother's eyes glistened with tears as she handed Jack the keys. "This is your future, Jack," she said, her voice shaking with pride. "We wanted you to have everything you need to start your career." My hands were trembling as I clapped along with everyone else, the sound of my own applause echoing in my head like a cruel joke. They couldn't find $20,000 a year for my tuition, but they had $60,000 to spend on Jack's future. My father caught my eye across the crowd and had the decency to look away, but my mother didn't even notice. She was too busy watching Jack rev the engine, too caught up in the story of his success, to see how she'd gutted mine. In that moment, I understood exactly where I stood in this family. I was the afterthought, the one expected to understand, to accept less, to be grateful for whatever scraps they decided to offer. I felt something inside me snap, a quiet shattering that made everything clear. My dreams were mine to fight for, and I would not let them decide how that fight ended. That night, I lay awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling, as the sounds of Jack's celebration still echoed faintly through the open windows. The truck's engine roared every now and then as he showed off to his friends in the driveway, the metallic growl slicing through the summer air like a taunt. I tried to shut it out, but every rev felt like a slap, every cheer, like a reminder that my family had chosen Jack's future over mine. The next morning, I couldn't pretend anymore. I needed to see it for myself. I waited until the house was empty, Jack gone to show off his new toy, and my parents at work, and I went into my father's home office, the place where he kept all the family paperwork. My hands shook as I searched through the drawers, finding file after file of financial statements, investment accounts, retirement funds. There was money more than enough to cover both Jack's truck and my tuition if they'd wanted to. I felt sick as I read the numbers, the clear proof that it wasn't about affordability, but about who they valued. I found the final confirmation in an email, my mother's words in black and white: truck will be ready for Jack's graduation. Let's tell Ava after the ceremony she'll be upset, but she'll understand eventually. Understand. As if I was expected to simply swallow my dreams and cheer for Jack the same way I always had. My throat burned with rage, my eyes stinging. I snapped a photo of the email with my phone, needing to hold on to the truth like armor. That night, I confronted them in the kitchen. My father was washing dishes, my mother drying them. They looked up in surprise when I walked in, holding my phone like a weapon. I found the emails, I said, my voice calm, but shaking at the edges. My father's expression went hard, his jaw clenching. My mother's face paled. Ava, you had no right, I cut her off. No right to know why you chose Jack over me. No right to know that you lied to my face every day. My father set down the dish he was holding, water, still dripping from his hands. We made a decision that was best for the family, he said flatly. This isn't about fairness, it's about what's practical. Practical. The word felt like poison on my tongue. You're right, I said, my voice icy. It's not fair. And I'm done pretending it is. My mother reached for me, her eyes pleading. Ava, honey, please. We love you. You have to understand. I do understand, I said, stepping back from her touch. I understand that I'm not your priority, that I never was. My father's face flushed red, anger breaking through his calm mask. Enough, he snapped. You're acting like a child. No, I said, my voice finally steady. I'm acting like someone who's done being lied to. In that moment, I decided that if they wouldn't fight for my future, I would. And I wouldn't just walk away. I would show them exactly how wrong they were to underestimate me. I posted everything online that night. The emails, the bank statements, the photos of Jack's new truck sitting in the driveway, while my college dreams were treated like an inconvenience. I wrote the truth in plain, unflinching words and hit upload. My phone buzzed for hours afterward, messages from friends, from classmates, from people in town who'd always thought my family was the picture of perfection. The truth cut through that illusion like a blade. I watched it all unfold with a strange calm, the storm I'd unleashed finally washing away the last of my doubt. For the first time, I wasn't the girl who kept the peace. I wasn't the daughter who smiled and took what she was given. I was Ava Williams, and I was done playing by their rules. If you've ever been forced to stand up against the people who were supposed to love you most, let me know in the comments below, and subscribe to my channel. Your stories and your courage matter. Let's remind each other that no betrayal can kill the fire in our hearts. The morning after my post went viral, I woke to find my phone still buzzing with messages, some from people I hadn't spoken to since high school, others from complete strangers who said my story gave them the courage to speak their own truths. But as the digital storm raged outside my childhood home was a silent war zone. My parents barely spoke to me, their faces tight with shame, and something like fury. Jack didn't even bother to come home that night, staying out late as if my public defiance was something he needed to distance himself from. I spent those days packing quiet and methodical filling suitcases with what little I could call mine. My childhood room was stripped down to its bones, no more honor roll certificates pinned to the walls, no more pictures of a future that had been nothing but a mirage. The act of folding clothes and tucking away memories felt like shedding skin, like I was finally stepping into the person I'd always been meant to be. My parents pretended not to notice. My mother moved around me like I was a ghost, her eyes red from crying, but her lips pressed into a tight line that said she still didn't understand why I'd done it. My father's disappointment was a constant presence crackling in the air every time I entered the room. But I didn't flinch. I didn't apologize. I refused to shrink to make them comfortable. My final morning at home, I left a note on the kitchen table. No tearful goodbyes, no explanations. Just a single line, I'm going to make something of my life, with or without you. Then, I walked out 2 suitcases trailing behind me, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might shatter. My ride to the bus station was a friend from high school, someone who'd seen the post, and offered me a way out. The whole time, he kept glancing at me like I was a stranger, like he couldn't believe I was the same girl who'd always kept her head down and her mouth shut. I didn't have the words to explain that I was a stranger, now stripped of the illusions I'd once called family, built entirely of the raw, unvarnished truth. The bus ride to New York was long and silent, the hum of the wheels on the highway lulling me into a strange calm. I stared out the window, watching the familiar Pennsylvania fields give way to city lights and steel and glass. My future lay somewhere out there in the skyline, a place where I could finally build something for myself by myself. When I arrived at Columbia, the city swallowed me whole, but instead of feeling lost, I felt weightless. Every towering building was a promise, every stranger's face, a reminder that I could be anyone I chose to be. I found a small sublet, a cramped studio, with peeling paint and a single window that looked out over an alleyway. It was perfect. It was mine. My first weeks were a blur of applications and paperwork meeting with admissions counselors and fighting for every inch of ground I'd once thought was guaranteed. I took on part-time work as a research assistant, spending long hours in the biology lab, my fingers stained with ink and my mind racing with possibility. My professors didn't know my story, didn't see the weight I carried in every answer I gave or every note I scribbled in the margins of my textbooks. But it didn't matter. Their expectations weren't colored by my last name or my family's betrayal. They saw me Ava Williams, the girl who wouldn't give up no matter how many doors slammed in her face. That was enough. I built a new family from the ground up, classmates who believed in me, professors who pushed me to be better friends, who didn't measure my worth in dollars or family legacy. And as I worked, I felt the anger in my chest turn into something else, fuel. Because here in the heart of a city that had never heard my family's lies, I was finally free to become the person they'd tried to keep me from being. If you've ever had to walk away from everything you thought you needed to survive, share your story in the comments below and subscribe to my channel. Together, we're rewriting what family means and what we deserve. Each day in New York was a test of everything I'd ever believed about myself. I woke early, driven by the idea that every hour spent working was another brick in the foundation of the life I was building from scratch. My mornings began in the cramped studio apartment I rented, light streaming through the cracked window and spilling across the single mattress that doubled as my bed and study corner. I'd shower quickly, tie back my hair, and head to campus with a determination I'd never known I possessed. The biology lab became my second home. Dr. Lin, my supervisor, didn't know about my family's betrayal, or the nights I spent staring at the ceiling questioning if I was truly strong enough to make it on my own. She only knew the girl who showed up early, who took the extra shift without hesitation, who asked questions that showed she cared about every detail of every experiment. In that lab, there was no room for family politics or gender roles, only curiosity, precision, and the quiet satisfaction of watching my name on data sheets grow from a footnote to something that mattered. My nights were spent hunched over textbooks and journal articles, my laptop glowing in the dark like a lighthouse. Sometimes, exhaustion pulled at my bones so hard, I thought I might collapse. But I kept going, driven by a fury that refused to die. My brother's truck, my mother's whispered excuses, my father's final dismissive words. I let them fuel me. Each new discovery in the lab, each page of notes I filled felt like a silent victory over the family that had tried to define my worth by my gender and my silence. Even when I was scared, even when the weight of being alone felt crushing, I reminded myself of that night in the kitchen when I'd finally said enough. That was the moment I'd chosen me, and I refused to look back. But the quiet rage didn't just live in the lab, it burned in me everywhere I went. One afternoon, as I walked to class past Columbia's Grand Library, I overheard two girls gossiping about a classmate whose father had bought her way into an exclusive internship. Their laughter grated at me, a reminder of the world I'd left behind, a world where doors opened for those with the right last name and closed to those who wouldn't play the part. I wanted to shout at them to tell them how lucky they were to be believed in, without having to prove themselves again and again. Instead, I bit my lip and kept walking, each step a quiet promise that I would never let someone else's opinion of me define my future again. Outside the classroom, my phone buzzed constantly. Messages from my mother filled with guilt and hollow apologies. Jack's half-hearted attempts to explain why he'd accepted their betrayal without a fight. I read them all, each word, another weight I refused to carry. I didn't respond. My silence was my final act of defiance, a refusal to let them shape my story anymore. Because the lesson I'd learned in that small-town kitchen, the one I carried like armor, through every late-night study session and every lonely meal, was that no one else gets to decide my worth. Not family, not tradition. Not a father who believed his son's legacy was worth more than his daughter's ambition. I was done letting anyone else have that power. If you've ever had to build your life from the ashes of someone else's expectations, share your story in the comments below and subscribe to my channel. Let's remind each other that what they try to bury in silence can become the roots of something unstoppable. My journey isn't over. There's still more to fight for, more to build. But I've learned that the fiercest kind of love isn't the one handed to you by birth. It's the one you carve out for yourself piece by piece in the face of every door slammed shut. It's the love that comes from refusing to be erased. And I promise you this, I will never let them erase me. The day I received my acceptance letter to the accelerated medical program at Columbia was the day I felt the final pieces of my old life fall away. I stared at the email, the words, "Congratulations" and "full scholarship" blurring as tears welled in my eyes. My hands shook as I read it over and over again, the ultimate proof that I'd been right to believe in myself when no one else would. This victory wasn't just for me. It was a final silent rebuke to the family who had decided my dreams weren't worth the investment. I thought back to the kitchen that night, the hush of betrayal that had filled the room, and the way I had refused to let their narrow vision define me. Now, standing on the edge of this new chapter, I felt an unexpected calm wash over me. I would walk across that graduation stage in my white coat, not because they gave me permission, but because I fought for it. My parents' silence still echoed in my life, but it no longer held power over me. My brother's face still flickered in my memories, but the weight of his golden boy status had become just that, his weight, not mine. Their legacy was theirs to carry. Mine was something I had built alone, brick by unbreakable brick. As I packed my final box, I tucked away the small remnants of the girl I used to be, photos of my childhood medals from high school competitions, pieces of a life I no longer needed to validate me. What mattered now was what I would do next. I was no longer the girl who waited for her family to see her worth. I was Ava Williams, future doctor, survivor of betrayal, and builder of my own destiny. If you've ever had to carve your own path out of someone else's shadow, drop a comment below and let me know you're out there. Subscribe to my channel because our voices deserve to be heard. This isn't just my story, it's a reminder that you don't need anyone's approval to rise. Let them see how far you'll go when you decide your worth for yourself. Huh.